YouTube recording. There we go. All right, as I was just saying, we had a pre-space where I had not set up the, the screenshots of the pages. So I have that now. But if you look back at the old recording, you'll see it. It's called the pre-space chat now. And we had actually a good discussion about Parmenides and ZhuangZi and some works about them, Moralatos' book. But unfortunately, I didn't record any of that for YouTube. But the recording is there on Twitter, and I don't know if that interests you, go check it out. But now this is an hour and something later. And so I now have recreated the space, and we will be continuing with the reading of the ZhuangZi. Again, like I was saying, I had taken a long break, and I didn't want to just let the project flounder. I mean, I started reading it, so why not finish it? As usual, I'll read through the text. Seems everyone's logged off by now after the original discussion, but I'm just going to read through the text. It'll all be recorded. And then after reading through the whole text, I'm going to go back to the beginning and take it piecemeal and just give my thoughts on it. Again, we've been reading the second chapter of the inner chapters, Qi Wu Luan, from the ZhuangZi. And we will, I promise, get through this whole section or this whole chapter at some point. This is 2.4. Next time I'll do 2.5, which is very short. And then 2.67. Oh yeah, still got a bit to go. All right. This is a translation from Christoph Harbsmeyer and John R. Williams. And you can see it up in the nest if you're on Twitter. If you're on YouTube, I don't know, just buy a copy, mate. 2.4 Problems with the Way. The men of old had knowledge that reached a certain point. Where did it get to? There are those who take the stage when there had never begun to exist. To be the ultimate. To be the point to which nothing can be added. The next stage they took to be when there are things, but there were no fixed boundaries between them. The next stage they took to be when there were fixed boundaries, but there had not begun to be evaluation by right and wrong. When right and wrong became prominent, that was the reason why the way failed. The reason why the way failed is the reason why subjective preferences arise. Why subjective preferences arises. But when all is said and done, do success and failure actually exist? Or is it that, when all is said and done, no such thing as success and failure exist? That success and failure exist would explain the case of Mr. Zhao strumming the zither. That there is no such thing as success and failure would then explain that Mr. Zhao was not playing the zither. Zhao Wen's strumming of the zither, Master Kuang wielding his cane, Master Hui leaning against his sterculia tree. These three men's understanding went practically as far as human understanding can go. They were all the most accomplished in their ways. That is why their feats have been transmitted to our latter days. Only on the point of their preferences they fancied that they were different from those others. And what they had their preferences for, it was their desire to make it clear to those others. What they had no clear understanding of, they tried to clarify. As a result, they ended up with their logical puzzles on hard and white. Their offspring ended their days in stringing together literary disquisitions, but to the end of their days they never got anywhere. Suppose that kind of career be called a success. Well, in that case, even I should count as a success. Or suppose that kind of a career cannot be called a success. In that case, neither I nor any other creature will ever be a success. In view of this, it is the glimmer of uncertainty and doubt that the sage focuses on. The assertive right he has no use for. He takes his temporary abode in whatever is current. This is what is called proceeding on the basis of lucidity of insight. Now suppose we have a proposition here, and we have no idea whether it belongs to the category X, or whether it does not belong to the category X. If belonging to the category X and not belonging to the category X both constitute categorization, then in that case, of both constituting categorizations, the this is in no way different at all from the that. This may be so, but please let me try to make such statements as examples. 1. There is a beginning. 2. There is a stage where there has not yet begun to be a beginning. 3. There is a stage where there has not yet begun to be a stage where there has not yet begun to be a beginning. 4. There is existence. 5. There is absence. 6. There is a stage where there has not yet begun to be absence. 7. There is a stage where there has not yet begun to be a stage where there has not yet begun to be absence. All of a sudden there is absence, and I do not quite understand which of the existence and absence are to be existent or absent here. Just now, as far as I am concerned, I definitely have said something, but I'm not so sure whether what I have proposed in point of fact does say anything, or whether in point of fact it does not say anything at all. One, nothing in the world is bigger than the tip of an autumn hair, and even Mount Tai counts as small. No one is more long-lived than a stillborn child, and Pengzu died young. Heaven and earth have been born together with me, and the myriad kinds of creatures are deemed to be one with me. But since we are all definitely already deemed to be one, how can there come to be a statement in addition to the one? And then, since I have indeed definitely called us all one, how can it come to pass there was no such statement? The unity of all things, together with that statement, that there is this unity, makes two things, and these two, together with their supposed unity, must be deemed to be three. If we go on from this point, then even a clued-up numerate registrar cannot get to grips with this, and how much less an untutored commoner. And so, setting out from absence, we get to something, so as to arrive at three. How much better can from existence we get to existence? But when one does not try to get anywhere, then that definitely is conditioned approval. The way has never had fixed borders, and speech has never had fixed constancy. When there is assertive right, there are artificial boundaries. Allow me to speak of these subjective boundaries. There is the humble left, and there is the noble right. There are personal analyses, and there are political debates. There are natural differences, and there are logical quibbles. There is personal competition, and there is political strife. And for these 8, one speaks of the 8 virtues. The things beyond the 6 realms of the world the sage leaves where they are, and does not discuss. The things within the 6 realms the sage discusses, but does not enter into political debate on. The generations of the annals and the aspirations of the early kings, the sage debates but does not quibble on. Thus, when one is setting up distinctions, there remains what these distinctions do not distinguish. As for quibbling, there remains what one has not properly quibbled about. You might say, so what? The point is, the sage thoughtfully embraces things, while the common flock of men quibble about things in order to show themselves off to each other. Therefore, it is said, as for quibbling, there are things that do not show up in it. Now, for example, the great way is not made explicit. The great quibble does without words. Oh, let me just fix this. Hold on. There we go. The great quibble does without words. Great benevolence is not benevolent. Great modesty is not modest. Great courage is not contentious. When the way shines forth, it is not in accordance with the way. When speech gets quibbling, it gets nowhere. When benevolence get routine, it is not fully realized. Okay. When modesty is immaculate, it is suspicious. If courage is contentious, it is not fully realized. These 5 cases are, as they say, round but approximately moving towards the square, and thus knowing how to stop where one does not know, that is the ultimate. But who understands the wordless quibbles, the way that does not play the way? If there is someone who is capable of understanding this, then he should be called a treasure house from heaven. It pours into him with wisdom, but he does not get full. One tastes from him, but he never gets used up. And the point is, he does not know wherefrom all this comes to him in the first place. This is called guarding the light. All right. That's the whole 2.4 section from the book. As with the other recordings, I'm going to go back now to the beginning and essentially just read through it again, but take it piecemeal and give my thoughts. Like I said, we had a discussion earlier and people had to leave, so I'm not sure if we'll have any comments from anyone, but if anyone wants a mic or wishes to join in, feel free to do so. And if you're listening to this later, I guess feel free to comment on it or reach out to me. I'll be here for the next one, I suppose. What did we begin with here? The men of old. Gul'Jaren. Alright, the men of old had reached that... Okay, the men of old had knowledge that reached a certain point. Okay. So sort of these ancient people understood something, their knowledge reached a certain point. Where was that point? Where did it get to? How far did it extend? There are those who take the stage when there had never begun to exist to be the ultimate, to be the point to which nothing can be added. All right, so we're going to talk about some sort of breadth of understanding or knowledge or some point or axiom, and it's one that's ultimate and nothing can be added to it. Obviously, that's extremely appealing to me because don't we say that what is or being is perfectly complete? Right? Because there's nothing else to be added from it because there only is what is, and so what is complete and ultimate and nothing can be added to it. Fantastic. So these people, these men of old, the first stage of knowledge seems to be just what is or is. As far as I can read, I suppose maybe they'll say da or something, or whatever term they want to use for that. But it's just here's the ultimate point. There is nothing can be added to it, just completion. All right. The next stage they took to be when there are things, but there are no fixed boundaries between them. What does it mean to be a thing and to not have a boundary? I can understand this in a way that appeals to me in the sense that what is the next stage of philosophy after we say that there is, or we talk of what is, or of being? Well, you start to chart out the nature of being. And they kind of already did that at the first stage when they said, this is ultimate, namely it's complete, in my mind at least. It's all subsuming or covers everything, and then it can't have anything added to it. Okay, that also necessarily follows. If this thing is what is, there's nothing else outside of it to add to it, and presumably it's full, so it can't accept anything. But yeah, so we have the next stage. They took there to be things, but there were no fixed boundaries between them. If the things are just the qualities or the necessary inferences or the nature of that original stage, now we're listing them, like it's changeless, it's complete, it's solitary, it's indivisible, it's etc. etc. By indivisible, I suppose I'm meaning unbreakable. But the if that's what we're doing, then yeah, there's no fixed boundaries because these are all the necessary inferences or nature of that first teaching, that first stage. And so they're not divided, they all attach to that one thing. So okay, yeah, no fixed boundaries. It's not like an apple over there and it's what we say of it only applies to the apple over there, and it doesn't apply to the orange over here. It's more, it applies to all things. There's no boundaries. These are all the properties of this one complete entity. Although I suppose, well, no, but also it all necessarily rolls out from the fact that of what is. So it's not even a boundary between the different qualities, right? Because all the different qualities, such as solitary, unchanging, unbreakable, complete, etc., single-limbed, whatever ones we want to pick out, we can say that they're different qualities, I suppose, but there's no fixed boundaries between them in the sense that they're all directly tied to the same justification or reasoning or inference, right? It all ties back to the same one single point that it is. Because again, how do we get the quality that it's solitary, for example? Well, there just is what is. So there you go. There's nothing else, so therefore it's solitary. How do we get that it's unchanging? Well, there's nothing else for it to become. It is what it is. Also, it doesn't make sense for it to not be what it is. So there you go. Again, it's all relying on the fact that we say in the grand teaching, or the original teaching or first stage as I'm interpreting it, that there just is what is, and therefore all these distinctions or all these things, the wu, yo wu, then that is all ultimately going to be tied to the exact same point. So I get it, there's no boundaries, there's no like separation of them, because ultimately it's all part and parcel of the same original teaching, namely that we speak of what is. So what's the next stage? The next stage they took to be when there were fixed boundaries, but there had not begun to be evaluation by right and wrong. Yeah, right and wrong, yeah. I mean, what does it mean to be right or wrong? I mean, I guess it's there's no perspectival sort of, because this text, again, it's been a while since we read the previous chapters, but essentially there's a lot of issues with privileging one perspective over another and getting beyond the individual perspectives and recognizing how they're all held in common in some sense. And so if the right and wrong there is either A, perspectival, or B, a denial or a claim that only some things exist and other things don't exist, it could be taken either way, I suppose. But if that's the track, he's saying we haven't yet begun to do that. So I suppose the ancient people started off by saying, yeah, ultimately, at the end of the day, there just is what there is. What is? That's what we speak about. Okay. And he says, okay, well, the next stage is there are people come along, talk about the nature of what is. Got it. All right. And then next stage comes along, and people start talking about apples, oranges, cups of tea, microphones, whatever. Okay. But they're not saying that the microphone is better or more real than the cup of tea, which is evil or non-existent or lesser. I mean, I guess that's what hasn't begun to happen yet. They have that detached perspective on the whole, but they're admitting of the details of the whole beyond its general nature. Now they're literally going into what a reader of Parmenides may recall is a section where he says, it's all full of what is. I guess it's all full of all possible meaning. So okay, but they're not privileging it. There's no hierarchy of being yet. And then we get to the last stage. What do we have here? When right and wrong became prominent, that was the reason why the way failed. Or, it was reduced, or, the reason why the way failed is the reason why subjective preferences arise. I don't know, it's plural there, but the preferences arises. But in any event, I get it. Okay, so if the right and wrong was being attached to perspectival or personal preference, then when people started not having that detached or objective view of things, where they didn't associate with their individual perspective and say that things closer to them were more real or were right, and the things that they felt were distasteful or distant were evil or non-existent, we get to the next stage where now they're starting to do that, and right and wrong become prominent. And as we read in the earlier chapters, maybe a Confucian will say, well, that's the right thing to do. A Maoist will say, well, that's the wrong thing to do. And now that thing is both right and wrong. Just make a dog's breakfast of it. When those disputes about some things being real and some things not being real, or some things being right and some things being wrong, become prominent, yes, of course, the way is going to be reduced, or I guess fail. Like, it's going to fall apart in terms of our account of it. And so from my perspective, what I want this to mean, he's basically saying those who don't accept that it all is, and start to say that some things more is than other things, think some things are more existent than other things, or some things outright don't exist or are lesser. When you start putting in gradations or hierarchy of being, or start cutting things out of the picture based on this right and wrong judgment, the whole begins to, the account of the whole at least, begins to fail, and you no longer have a coherent account of reality, or a coherent understanding of the whole. You just become perspectival and I guess biased and incapable of appreciating the truth, the whole truth. You're just partial, and the partial truth is not the whole truth. So the way fails or becomes less, or is cut apart or whatnot. Not literally, obviously. The person's just confused. But their account is certainly less. Their account is certainly a failure, because they no longer give an account of the whole or appreciate the whole. So what do we have next here? But when all is said and done, do success and failure actually exist? Or is it that when all is said and done, no such thing as success and failure exist? Well, what do we mean here by success and failure? All right. Oh, yeah, okay. Well, let's read the next section here. Would explain that success and failure exist would explain the case of Mr. Zhao strumming the zither. That there is no such thing as success and failure would then explain that Mr. Zhao was not playing the zither. I mean, this bit about Mr. Zhao, I have to admit, I have no idea who Mr. Zhao is, but I do have a copy of another commentary that dropped a footnote to a commentary that's not included in this book that I took screenshots of. And Zhao is apparently a famous player of the zither from antiquity. I mean, I guess we could have, we probably figured that out for ourselves, but I'm going to read this section from a commentary which tries to explain what's going on here. It says, there is no end to the number of tunes. Therefore, when one blows the pipes or plucks the strings, even if one strains one's hands to do this, the tunes one leaves out are numerous. And when one picks up the tubes and gets the strings to sing, he wants to bring out the tunes. When one brings out the tunes, some tunes get left out. Therefore, as for wanting to succeed but failing in the task is the case of Zhao strumming the zither. As for not succeeding but not falling short either, for this Zhao not strumming his zither is a case in point. I mean, if that makes sense to you, great. I was thinking more that success and failure. Like, if we're tying the term success and failure here to that last stage of the analysis where they've inserted shi fei or right and wrong in the translation here, if we're associating it with that last stage, then success and failure are going to be related to some limited perspective. And so again, everything will be a success and everything will be a failure, just like there are people who think that oranges taste good and there are some people that oranges taste bad. And so how do success and failure exist? Well, I suppose there'll be these perspectival judgments, or the subjective preferences, or what people are wanting, right? And so that success and failure exist. which is to say, in my interpretation I'm going with right now, if we're at that stage where right and wrong have become prominent, this would explain the case of Mr. Zhao strumming the zither. Well, right. So Mr. Zhao, or Zhao Wen, is this famous player of the, what is it, qin. He's a famous player of this instrument, right? The zither. And what makes him a success? Like, why is he so successful? Well, because people prefer the way he does it, right? It's not that you and I can't play the zither, but we wouldn't, like, people would say that we play it poorly, or at least they would say I play it poorly relative to Mr. Zhao. And so I would be the failure, Mr. Zhao would be the success when it comes to the zither playing. And really, what's the judgment there? It's not the fact that we're playing a zither, because we're both doing that, absolutely. In that sense, I'm equal to Mr. Zhao. But in the sense of personal preference for the type of music or tune being generated, well, okay, now I get success and failure. So yes, that right and wrong have become prominent, or that success and failure exist. Yes, I understand now why we're talking about Zhao Wen strumming the zither, because obviously, in a relative sense, he's doing it better in the judgment of most people, I imagine. That there is no such thing as success and failure would then explain that Mr. Zhao was not playing the zither. Now, I don't know why it's him not playing the zither, rather than his playing of the zither not being remarkable. Because, like I was saying, if we take away the right and wrong, if those are no longer prominent, again, equating that with the success and failure, he's still playing it. I mean, but I am too, and we're equal. And so the way is big enough for both of us to play. But maybe this is not going to be a appropriate interpretation, but that's kind of the way I would want to take it, at least off the top of my head, off the cuff. That's how I'd want to do it. Zhao Wen's strumming of the zither, Master Kuang's wielding his cane, Master Hui leaning against his sterculia tree. I'm just going to say tree. Master Hui leaning against a tree. These three men's understanding went practically as far as human understanding can go. All right. They were all the most accomplished in their ways. Right, that's what we're saying. Mr. Zhao is awesome at playing the zither. I'm not. He's a success. I'm a failure. But insofar as right and wrong have not become prominent, yeah, we're equal. Because we're both existing and we're both doing the same action. That is why their feats have been transmitted to our later days, or latter days. Yeah, okay, yeah. Right and wrong became prominent, and I guess that's what the root of their accomplishments is, in this sort of contentious or relative sense. Only on the point of their preferences, they fancied that they were different from those others. Wei Qi Hao Zhi. All right, so they were different from everyone else in terms of the things that they loved or what they preferred. What they had their preference for, it was their desire to make it clear to those others. All right, so they became different from others because of the things that they preferred and I guess worked out really hard, and they really wanted to illuminate it for other people. But okay, what they had no clear understanding of, they tried to clarify. All right, so they tried to make clear the unclear, I suppose, and as a result, they ended up with their logical puzzles on hard and white. All right, well, hard and white is obviously okay. There's in antiquity by the time of the ZhuangZi, there's essays, at least by Gong Xuan Long, on Jian Bai or whatever, yeah. Okay, so there's a reference to these sort of logical puzzles or essays or treatises that were also kind of known for being confusing, I suppose, which makes it funny, right? So they became exalted or different from others in terms of their preferences, and they wanted to make everyone else understand them. And in trying to make them understandable, they wound up making it all confused with these essays on the hard and the white. And their offspring, their kids, ended their days also doing this, I guess. But to the end of the days, they never got anywhere. Okay, and so yeah, they end their days without a success, or the it's the same word being used for success, but whatever. They don't achieve the end or that goal. Doesn't come to fruition. They just basically confused everything. Suppose that kind of career be called a success. Well, in that case, even I should count as a success. Well, right, because if the goal was to write these logical treatises about hard and white and illuminate everything and make everyone understand, they tried really hard at it, but they didn't get there. And similarly, I may try really hard at something, but I guess... And it says, yeah, in that case, I should count as a success. Because they didn't achieve enlightening anyone, and so I guess the author or the person also won't enlighten anyone and should also count as a success. Because if they're a success, then so am I, because neither one of us achieved the ultimate goal. But suppose that kind of a career cannot be called a success. In that case, neither I nor any other creature will ever be a success. All right, because they tried really hard and got to the height of their field. And if that doesn't mean a success, well then, the rest of us certainly aren't going to be successful. In view of this, it is the glimmer of uncertainty and doubt that the sage focuses on. The assertive right he has no use for. He takes his temporary abode in whatever is current. This is what is called proceeding on the basis of lucidity of insight. Yeah, I mean, if this is just saying that we need to go beyond these... why is he taking his temporary abode in whatever is current? Yeah, but ultimately, if the point is we're not going to be clinging to these limited preferences and then trying to illuminate or elucidate them via these bizarre logical puzzles, or trying to teach the unteachable, or trying to make people like us when they are not us, then yeah, of course, the sage isn't going to go do that. I suppose the sage is going to take temporary abode in whatever is current and go with the prevailing standard, but not prefer it over other standards that may come along, I suppose. Here we go. Now, suppose we have a proposition here. We have no idea whether it belongs to category X, okay, or whether it does not belong to the category X, okay. If belonging to the category X and not belonging to the category X both constitute categorization, then in that sense of both constituting categorizations, the this is in no way different at all from the that. Well, right. This is, I mean, again, this is why I love this text, especially, I mean, obviously I'm interpreting it the way I want to, but let's apply this to existence and non-existence. If I'm saying that there's what exists and there's what doesn't exist, well, actually, the existing and non-existing are the same in the sense that they both are categories. They're both categorized, if you mention any particulars within the category. So in a sense, the existing and non-existing is the same. And that's the whole point, because there is no... Ultimately, it all gets unified. There's no opposing, distinct, cut-off, wholly independent opposite from what is, or in this case, from categorization. You can't posit another category opposite categorization. Whatever you're positing, it's all going to fall under categorization in this example, and for the broader example, it's all going to fall under what is or being. And I especially like that point because, of course, how often do I find myself talking with people who want to say that only some things exist and other things don't exist, that there's a being and a non-being, and it's all sort of, it all misses the point at the end of the day, because being is what is there to speak about. And similarly, both categories may oppose each other in their schema, but the categories are equal in the sense that they're all categories. And I mean, the broader metaphysical point is going to be that as categories, they will have to comply with the nature of categorization, And similarly, as things being referenced or as being consumed by what is, it will have to comply with the nature of what is. Although that's not spelt out here. Let me try to make such statements. Okay, go for it. They added numbers here, but it's all right. I'm just going to cut the numbers out and go through these. There is a beginning. Okay. There's a stage where there has not yet begun to be a beginning. Okay. There is a stage where there has not yet begun to be a beginning. 有为时有时也者. Okay. Yeah, it's just like a tongue twister. There is a stage where there has not yet begun to be a stage where there is... Yeah, okay, whatever. And why not... I mean, yeah, not yet. Okay. Could be never, according to another commentator. So it would be... There is a stage where there has not yet begun to be a beginning. There's a stage where there has never begun. There's never been a beginning. I don't know. This is kind of dense, and let's see what he's actually trying to say at the end. It's odd because 1, 2, 3, there is a beginning. There's a stage where there has not yet begun to be a beginning. There's a stage where there has not yet begun to be a stage where there has not yet begun to be a beginning. Those follow the same format. Generally, I mean, obviously they get longer, but they're following this. They're repeating the same. For the most part, they're repeating the same clauses. But then it goes: there is existence, there is absence. 有有也者，有无也者，有为时有无也者. Yeah, so it's almost like 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6 are distinct, but 6 and 7, okay, so 1, 2, 3 look fairly distinct from 4 and 5, but then 6 and 7 are combining 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5. Yeah, this is... I would have to sit down and like try to what, you know what, even if I went over and reread it again, it's like what actual point is he trying to make? Because I can agree or disagree with any of these lines. I can see how he's piecing them together, and I can relate it back to the categorizations part. I mean, why say there is existence, there is absence? We know that's going to fall into a problem, because deposit yo and deposit wu, then both yo and wu are going to be categories, right? They're going to be equal. Is he trying to make that point later on? Here we go. I should stop talking and just read what he's saying. All of a sudden there is absence. Why? Are yo e what? So he finished. Okay, so we finished the tongue twisters, and we get to all of a sudden there is absence. And I do not quite understand which of the existence and absence. Yeah. Okay. Are to be existent or absent here. Yeah, exactly. So if you are positing an existence and you're positing an absent, well, they're both subsumed by categorization, or to be a category. And so which one is the real is and which one is the real without? Because we're both saying they're here. But if the is only partial and it's against a without, then that sense of is cannot be the whole is or the whole existence. It has to be something else. And it seems to be the equal of the absence, because again, the absence is something and being put against the limited is. And so the limited is and the limited absence cannot be existent or absent, because both those terms have, in my opinion, been corrupted. So this is the exact same. It's the same complaint I had earlier, not against ZhuangZi, but against everyone outside of this tradition and outside the Eleatic tradition. It's that they've corrupted the phrase existence, and he's just demonstrated it here. It's like, look, if I say there is and there is not, well, which one is? Is it the stuff in the category is that is, or is it the stuff in the category of absence that is? And it's like, well, we're prevaricating, or we're equivocating on the use of the term is when we're trying to say which one truly is, because we have a category titled is, but it's equivalent to the category titled is not, in the sense that they're both categories. And so you can't say which one is more truly category. you would have to find some other. You can no longer use the word existent or absent properly. If that's the point he's trying to make? Like, yes, I think that's really an important and insightful point that I wish a lot of people would carefully consider, because I feel like that's one of the first responses I often get to people when they're confronted with an omnipresent sense of is and have to evaluate their own ideas. It's a very important point. But it's hard to tease out from this text, I guess. I think it's there though. Yeah. It's like, oh, I've admitted that is and is not, or existence and absence, are these categories if we're relating it back to the above section. And in doing so, I've made them equal. And which of them truly exists? Well, truly exists is going to have to be... Again, and I do not quite understand which of the existence and absence are to be existent or absent here. Yeah, because now that they've been categorized, it's just a category labeled existence, a category labeled absence. And the category labeled absence can't be the absence that was initially... It's unstated, but would presumably have been a non-existence or not there to be spoken of. And they can't be labeled... There's not a category that is there to be what is existent, because what is existent, we equivocated, because the what is existent actually encompasses both categories of existence and absence. And so we've kind of corrupted the word existent there. So the word absent never should have been stated or uttered, and it was. And so in any event, it cannot serve us any role here, because now absence has been made affirmative because it's a category, and existent has been corrupted because we now have existence as a limited category, and existence as the fact that it is there to be spoken of, or is categorization per se. So we've corrupted one term and improperly added the other term that is meaningless. Absent is meaningless in this absolute sense. I probably made my own dog's breakfast of it. Sorry to anyone who has to work their way through that, but I think that's I'm just relating it to arguments that I've myself have had with others, and I think that's what this is speaking to. Just now, as far as I'm concerned, I definitely have said something, but I'm not so sure whether what I have proposed in point of fact does say anything, or whether in point of fact it does not say anything at all. Yeah, people will probably say that about what I just said. And it's interesting, again, he has the two categories, or the two opposing attributes. Does say anything, does not say anything. But yeah, what's the Chinese there? Well, whatever, let's just move on. Hold on. Your way. Alright. Nothing is bigger in the world. Okay, nothing in the world is bigger than the tip of an autumn hair, and even Mount Tai counts as small. No one is more long-lived than a stillborn child, and Peng Zu died young. Alright, well, heaven and earth have been born together with me, and the myriad kinds of creatures are deemed to be one with me. But since we are all definitely already deemed to be one, how can there come to be a statement in addition to the one? Okay, so I think somewhere in the middle there, we've moved on to a new point. Yeah, I mean, this whole book opens with a discussion, not this chapter, but the first chapter of the book. Again, it's been a while since I read the first chapter, but isn't it about relative sizes? Yeah. So presumably, things are big relative to little stuff. Little stuff is big relative to... Big stuff is big relative to little stuff, and little stuff is little relative to bigger stuff. So yeah, nothing in the world is bigger than the tip of an autumn hair, I guess. And even Mount Tai counts as small. Yeah, well, the heavens are bigger than Mount Tai or Dashan. And so therefore, it would be small relative to the heavens, and nothing in the world is bigger than, I guess, no particular thing is going to be bigger than the whole, or bigger than heavens. Yeah. All right. And I guess the tip of an autumn hair, if you want to reword it, is going to be larger than anything smaller than that. No one is more long-lived than a stillborn child. Yeah, well, I mean, I guess it's had its whole life. And we haven't, like I haven't experienced my whole life yet, but a stillborn child has. So in that sense, the child was more long-lived in the sense that he went from start to finish, and I haven't. And Peng Zu died young. Okay, well, that's... I don't know much about Peng Zu, but he's supposed to be either an immortal or an extremely long-lived person. And he died young. Yeah, well, there are things that last longer than him, right? I mean, there are turtles and trees that probably live an extremely long time. Although Peng Zu is supposed to live... I don't know enough about him, but he's supposed to be extremely long-lived. Heaven and earth have been born together with me, and the myriad kind of creatures are deemed to be one with me. That's a more interesting point for me, I think, here. Because, yeah, he's right. Heaven and earth are here with me. In a sense, we're equal. Like, I'm here, heaven and earth are here. We're both here in the same sense, absolutely. And all the different kinds of creatures, they're all one with me. And that we're all creatures, right? We're all here. We're all stuck in this context together, and no one is more or less real or more or less in this context. I'm not sure if that's what he's trying to say by that, but that's certainly the takeaway that I want to take from it. But since we are all definitely already deemed to be one, how can there come to be a statement in addition to the one? All right. So this is where I think he's gone to a new point here. And then, since I have indeed definitely called us all one, how can it come to pass? There was no such statement. Wait. Okay, how can there come to be a statement in addition to the one? Alright, so he says, like, everything is one. Okay. And then your statement in addition to that one. That observation that I just uttered. So now you have two things. You have all the entities, the myriad of creatures, and then you have the statement describing them as one. So now you have two things. The creatures as a unified entity or collection, and the statement. How can there come to be a statement in addition to the one? But I've definitely called us one, so how could it come to pass there was no such statement? Well, right, okay, so yes. How do we know there was a statement? Well, I made the statement. I have direct experience of it. And so now that we have direct experience of this and can't deny it, what do we make of the fact that we said there was just one, but now we have a statement describing it as one, which would therefore be a separate thing and be two? The unity of all things together with that statement, that there is a unity, make two things, right? And these two, together with their supposed unity, must be deemed three. I mean, what's their unity? I suppose it's the... I mean, we're just getting into a regress of relationships now. Because we have the animal, we'll just call it the animal kingdom, and then the statement that the animal kingdom is one. Okay? So that we have two things now. And so are these two things related? Yes. The statement has some sort of relationship to the animal kingdom and vice versa. Okay, well that relationship itself is going to be three. But then we can just follow like the Eleatic, like these paradoxes where we say, okay, yeah, this is just that, maybe I'm wrong here, I think he's just making the paradox that, I don't know if paradox is the right word, but if we go back to, I think it's either Zeno or Diodorus Cronus, we're going to say, how are two objects separated? Well, they need to have a border between them, right? I'm pretty sure this is Zeno of Alea. I haven't read this one in ages. But let's say we have two objects, like two squares. What separates one square from the other and makes them two objects rather than one object? Presumably there's some divider or some gap between them. It's like, all right, well, so if you rest two squares next to each other, why isn't that just one rectangle? Why is it two separate distinct objects, a square and a square, rather than just one solid object? It's like, well, there's a division or a divider or something that separates them. I'll call it a border, okay? I guess in the language of this, it's going to be like feng or whatever. Feng jian she hui de feng. But it's going to have that divider. Well, okay, but what separates the divider from each square? Because if you have a square and it needed something to divide it or separate it from the other square to stop them just being one object, one solid, unbroken object, then how is that divider entity not part of a square? Again, if the rule was that to be not part of something, you have to be separated from it by a divider, for example, then that rule should apply to the divider too. And so you have to put another divider and another divider and another divider. That seems to be kind of the regress he's doing here. Well, you have the animal kingdom, you have a comment about the animal kingdom, and they have, how are we connecting them? Well, they have a relationship. Okay, well, for things to be connected, they need a relationship. Well, what's the relationship between the relationship and the animal kingdom, and the relationship and the statement? Because otherwise, you can't have the third thing separated from them and connecting them. Like how things... I'd have to word it slightly better, but it seems to me like the same regress argument that we see against objects that need dividers. But in this case, it's more objects needing to be connected. So it's actually taking it in from the other angle. But yeah, if the rule is to be connected, you need a third thing to connect them. Well, what is it that connects the connected to the connector? Again, you'll need something in there, because a rule would still apply. And so you'll just have an infinite regress of connectors connecting to other connectors in order to ultimately make the connection. It's not going to work. So presumably you shouldn't engage in that. If we go on from this point, then even... And yeah, so we've got the comment about people being able to count them all out. Or they won't be able to count to the end of it. Exactly, because it's just an infinite regress. How much better can from existence we get to existence? Well, ultimately, I think the right move here is, and probably what he means is, we shouldn't engage in those models that are causing the infinite regress. It's all going to have to be about one solid, complete object, the whole, or the Tao, or whatever. But that's... I don't know how well fleshed out that is in the text, but he's definitely identified, in my opinion, the infinite regress issue, and presumably the immediate advice is going to be, don't engage in such ridiculousness as these infinite regresses, which is also how I read Zeno and others. It's like, hey, look what happens when we take your model. Don't do that. The way has never had fixed borders. Well, yeah, okay, fixed borders. Your Fong. Yeah, it's a Fong there that I said earlier. Yeah, well, if he's saying like the way has never been like that, then yeah, that's the point. Don't engage in this infinite regress stuff about needing a relation between things, because then you're just going to have to need a relationship between the relation and the thing ad infinitum. And the way is not like that. It doesn't have fixed borders where things are detached and have a rule that requires another detached thing to connect them. So it's never been like that. That's right. The way is just this complete, indivisible whole, and everything is, I guess, clinging to all things. It's all ultimately one big thing, and it's all details of it. But again, that's me running away with the text. Speech has never had fixed constancy. Yeah, I don't want to say much about that. Yeah, I mean, whatever. When there is assertive right, there are artificial boundaries. Allow me to speak of these subjective boundaries. There is the humble left and the noble right. There are personal analyses and there are political debates. When there is assertive right, there are artificial boundaries. Well, by assertive right, presumably we're hearkening back to the beginning where we were saying the diminishing of the way occurred when we had right and wrong. And so when we started talking about right and wrong, we got the virtues, the 8 virtues. Okay, so the first one, for example, is have a left and have the right. He's put humble and noble. Well, but I guess that makes sense. If they're going to be called the Ba-De or the 8 virtues, then yeah, I guess left and right are going to be called humble or noble, personal and political, natural and logical. Yeah, all right. Personal competition and political strife. Okay, yeah, the things beyond the 6 realms of the world. I mean, 6 realms, like the directions. So you got, northeast, southwest, and you have up and down, 6, maybe. Sage leaves where they are and does not discuss the things within the 6. Okay, so if we're talking about anything beyond the 6 directions or the 6 realms, we leave them where they are and don't discuss them. I don't think that's actually, I must be wrong, because I don't think that's just saying that we talk about what's spatial and we don't talk about what's not spatial. I think the 6 realms of the world just has to be read as the 6 realms has to be read as a like what is. The things beyond what is, the sage doesn't discuss them. Well, right, because the whole conversation about something other than what is, like there is that which is not, or there is that which is other than what is. It's just contradictory nonsense. A sage wouldn't want to speak about that at all, to put it into more Parmenidean language. But because after all, no tidings come from that path, and as we learn later in that poem, there is no such path. It's just nonsense, it's gibberish. It's not to say that there is a path that is not, it's just that it was confused to ever suggest that there could be 2 paths. The words fall apart into meaninglessness. And similarly, those that talk about the things beyond the 6 realms of this world, the sage leaves all that talk alone because it's all nonsense. And the things within, the sage discusses but does not enter into political debate on. Well, right, he doesn't try to take a privileged or a biased perspective. Yeah, he'll talk about things within, that is to say, he'll talk about what is, what's there to be spoken of, but he's not going to enter into political debates on it where he sides with one faction over another, because again, it all equally is. It's all equally there and absolutely there within the 6 realms, or within what is. It's all absolutely 100% there to be spoken of. And he's not going to try to make claim that one part of what can be spoken of can be more spoken of than the other parts. Like it's not, things are not more or less real. So he's not going to get into that diminishing and concentration of the Tao, I suppose. The generations of the annals and the aspirations of the early kings, the sage debates but does not quibble on. Okay. Thus when one is, well, that's going to be, yeah, okay. The sage debates but does not quibble on. Thus, when one is setting up distinctions, there remains what these distinctions do not distinguish. As for quibbling, there remains what one has not properly quibbled about. You might say, so what? The point is, the sage thoughtfully embraces things, while the common flock of men quibble about things in order to show themselves off to each other. Well, yeah, I think that's what I said. The sage will thoughtfully embrace everything. The text just says, this translation just says the sage thoughtfully embraces things. I'm saying the sage thoughtfully embraces all of it. And the common flock of men are quibbling about the particulars in trying to get a personal advantage or to diminish one side and make their side look better. The sage has no interest in that because the sage understands that there is what there is. It's all real, and he's going to embrace it all as a whole and treat it all equally insofar as it is. And that's the appropriate way to behave, and not try to diminish certain details in favor of other details. Therefore it is said, as for quibbling, there are things that do not show up in it. Now, the great way is, things that don't show up in it, of course. If you're quibbling, if you're saying like some things aren't real or are less real or inferior, you're kind of, what was that phrase at the beginning, like doing harm to the Tao or making the Tao fail? Yeah, you're making you're doing harm to your account or understanding of the whole, or your understanding of the Tao. You're just, or the way. You're not, you're no longer having that broad understanding of reality. And so for the quibblers, they will never be able to to achieve success, I suppose, in their understanding of the whole, or to have any respectable understanding of it, because inherent in their position is to deny part of it, or to I guess not refute, but to discard or destroy or defeat part of it, which is just incoherent at the end of the day. But let's see. Now, for example, okay, fool. All right. The great way is not made explicit. The great quibble does without words. Great benevolence is not benevolent. Great modesty is not modest. Great courage is not contentious. When the way shines forth, it is not in accordance with the way. When speech gets quibbling, it gets nowhere. When benevolence gets routine, it is not fully realized. When modesty is immaculate, it is suspicious. If courage is contentious, it is not fully realized. These 5 cases are, as they say, round but approximately moving towards the square. What? And thus knowing how to stop where one does not know, that is the ultimate, but who understands the wordless quibbles, the way that does not play the way. Well, let's just look at the last 2 lines there. The last 4. And thus knowing how to stop where one does not know. That is the ultimate. But who understands the wordless quibbles, the way that does not play the way? Well, actually, let's just focus on the last 2 lines. Who understands the wordless quibbles, the way that does not play the way? I hope this is saying what was said at the top of the page, which is essentially that the quibblers are engaging in a practice that cannot represent or give an account of or cannot appreciate the whole, because they inherently wish to demean or oppose some of its majesty or detail. They're trying to so that they can make their limited portion of it seem all the more important. And who can understand the wordless quibbles that engage in all sorts of contradictory nonsense? And so far as being contradictory and biased or perspectival nonsense, it cannot be the way, because it, like I said at the beginning of the book, causes the way to fail, or is just a failed account of it. Again, maybe I read too much into it, or I have my own limited reading of the text, but off the cuff, I reckon that's might be what he's getting at. If there is someone who is capable of understanding this, then he should be called a treasure house from heaven. All right. Maybe I'm not supposed to understand it then. Maybe I am myself quibbling. Or else I'll have to call myself a treasure house from heaven. It pours into him with wisdom, but he does not get full. One tastes from him, but he never gets used up. And the point is, he does not know wherefrom all this comes to him in the first place. This is called the guarding the light. This is called, well, I'll drop the in the middle there. It's called guarding the light. All right. Yeah, I mean, one tastes from him, but he never gets used up. Well, of course, I mean, if he's just saying there is what there is and here's the nature of being, he can apply that to any given scenario and never get exhausted, because he has his constant understanding of the whole and just makes sure everything is consistent with that. He's never going to run out of things to say. He can always just respond to all the various different quibbles and claims and point out where they go awry, where they don't so much depart from the whole, but just fall into confusion and try to diminish the whole, or to make it fail or be less or worse, be partial. So yeah, I get it. If he understands the whole and is constant in his understanding of the whole and consistent in applying it to everything else, then yeah, he's never going to get used up or run out or tired, because his knowledge is complete and he can just point out the way that all the other points fall short or engage in confusion or contradiction. And so, yeah, maybe that's what it's saying. I hope that's what it's saying, because that's how I feel about metaphysics. All right. Well, that's 2.5 after that. I've been going for a while now. It's been an hour and a little more than an hour. And as I mentioned, we previously had a discussion just before this space that was also maybe an hour. So I'm going to stop this recording here, upload it to YouTube. Unfortunately, I don't actually have the a recording of the discussion. I'll link it. It's on Twitter. But even then, it's kind of... you'll have to dance around with the time on it, because there's a long period of silence at the beginning of the space, and then there's a long period of silence after. So you kind of have to find it in there. But there was about an hour discussion about Parmenides and the ZhuangZi. It was interesting, and also Muralatus's work on Parmenides, the root of Parmenides, and also on Gallup's translation. But it's been good. I'm glad I managed to take this recording down, and not take it down, but have it recorded and continue these readings. We will get through the whole chapter, and hopefully there won't be as long a period of time between this recording and the next one as there was between this and section 3. Thank you.